Caledonia Forum here at the Barton Municipal Building. My name is Todd Pronto. I'm from NEK-TV in Newport, Vermont. We are filming this, so if you want to watch it again or you want to advise somebody to watch it, they can check it out on channel 15 on the Comcast. We'll also be putting it on YouTube as well. And of course, the Chronicle's here covering it, and the Orleans County Record. So plenty of coverage. We're going to go through and try to get as many questions in as possible, and then we will open it up to the floor as well. If anybody is dying to ask a question themselves towards the end, we'll open it right up. Brief format. Each candidate's going to have a 3-minute opening statement, and then when we get to the questions, each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer, and then when we get down to the end, they'll have 2 minutes for closing. Robin is our timekeeper here today, so she'll be keeping you on track for the 2 or 3 minutes. She has a sign that says 15 that she's going to hold up. That means 15 seconds, not 15 minutes. Just wanted to clarify that. So if you see that, about 15 seconds. A heads up, yeah. It's more like a courtesy.
It's a courtesy. And this thing will make a little jingle or something.
The little timer sound?
Yeah.
And by all means, finish your thought. You don't have to stop mid-sentence.
Just it gives you a chance to finish your sentence, your train of thought as you. And if I could just get everybody to look up for a moment, and then I'll be done with my obligatory photo.
You want to make sure you look good in the paper. They don't Photoshop in the paper, so.
Anyway, thank you.
I request that they Photoshop me, but.
No.
If you're really going on too long, I'll hit this. But I don't think we'll need to hit that tonight.
No, I mean, it's a courtesy, just so everybody gets the same amount of time.
So we have one mic that we're going to have to kind of pass down. I get my own mic because I'm famous. And then, no, actually the cord's not long enough on this one to really go that far. So what we'll do is we'll just start from my left, which would be your right, and we'll just go down and we'll start with opening statements, and then we'll get into the questions. The questions were submitted to the newspapers by the public. So if you don't like the question, I didn't write them. I'm just the deliverer. Deliverer?
And one thing.
Yes.
At a certain point, at 10 after, is that right? About 10 after, we'll pause and
Quarter after.
About quarter after.
Quarter after, take a question from the audience.
Yep.
Okay.
Cool. All right. Well, you're the closest, Frank. So.
I'm the closest.
So just to reiterate, 3 minutes for an opening statement.
Okay. I'm Frank Eward. I ran 2 years ago. I'm from Craftsbury. I was born in Morrisville. I'm a homeschooling father. I've been married for 14 years. In the same committed relationship for 20. I have 2 daughters, one 13 and one 7. I'm a goat farmer, Vermont's only Tier 2 raw goat milk producer. I'm a concrete contractor, and I sell some firewood. I'm a property owner, and I've lived in Craftsbury since 2006. About 5 miles from the farm where my grandmother was born in 1925, and where our family has been milking cows since the mid-1800s. So I sort of feel like I'm back to my roots in Craftsbury. And we moved there at a time when the housing industry was folding and the greatest recession since the Great Depression was happening. We saw an opportunity in goat farming when the concrete business was taking a nosedive. So that's how we came to part of how we came to be in Craftsbury. I wanted my children to grow up on a working farm a little bit further away from Morrisville and Stowe, which was changing quite drastically. And so part of the reason I'm running is because I want my children to grow up in the Vermont that I knew, so that they can live and work here in the future. And I'm passionate about the role that state government plays in people's lives. And so I'll tell you about an experience I had most recently with state government. I tried to get some information from the state, and so I needed to do a records request. So I was told I needed to call the Secretary of State. So I called the Secretary of State. They told me I needed to call finance. No, they told me I needed to call Legislative Council. So Legislative Council told me I needed to talk to finance. Finance sent me back to the Secretary of State. The Secretary of State sent me to the Human Services Department. And so now I'm back to finance. So my point is, and maybe others in the audience have had similar experiences, but my experience with state government is oftentimes the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. And I really feel like our government is broken, and I feel like I can play a role in helping fix it.
All right, thank you. And Vicki, you're next.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming, and thank you to Todd, who's hosting, and Tina, who helped put this all together, matching all our schedules. I'm sure was a challenge. And I've been serving in the legislature for 4 terms, which is 8 years, and this would be my 5th term running. I am married to Nathan Strong. We've been married for 41 years and raised 3 children. One of our children has passed away, but the others are in their 30s and married and doing well. And it was a privilege to raise them here in Vermont. And in our small communities, we know each other and we need each other and we serve each other. And it seemed kind of like the next step for me 8 years ago when I was asked to run for office, because I had just been serving in my community for 25 years at that point. And serving as a pastor's wife. My husband Nate is a minister in Albany, serving by working for Weight Watchers, helping people not only lose weight but get a healthier lifestyle. And when I was asked to run for office, I thought, well, it's another form of service. And 8 years later, I feel the same way, that I am here and running, not because it's easy or because it's popular, but because I love serving, and I love serving my community and my constituents. And I believe that's the most important part of the job. And yes, it's important to be there voting when we're in session, but throughout the year we work, and those who serve know, we get phone calls and emails. Hey, how can I get my phone turned back on? How can I get connected to get health insurance? My taxes are so high, I need help paying them. So I feel like it's a privilege to serve as a liaison between the legislature and our government and my constituents. And I take that job very seriously. I've had the privilege of being on 3 different committees, and the one I'm presently on is called General Housing and Military Affairs. And one of my passions is the military, as my son Jesse served in the Marine Corps, and housing. So I also serve on the board of Rural Edge, and I'm very passionate about housing needs in the Northeast Kingdom and in our area especially, and homelessness. So those are a couple of the topics I particularly have a passion for, and if I'm reelected, I will go back and do my best representing those I serve. So thank you.
Thank you. Oh. Tabitha, correct? Yes.
So my name is Tabitha Armstrong. I'm from Glover. I live and work in the area. I own a home. I have a teenager who has gone through some of the school system here, and we decided to homeschool. I feel that public service is incredibly important. It's always been very important to me, and it was always something that I intended on eventually doing. But over the last session, I became much more involved in politics earlier than I had planned on due to my son's age. And that was because of some of the things that were happening in the government here in Vermont. And so my biggest thing with Vermont government is that we have a hard time finding the information that we want here. It's almost impossible to find out what the bills are and what they mean. You can go on the state site and you can find the bills in their entirety, but to get the actual information that you need is very, very difficult. So that was one of the things that I really noticed this session with a lot of the laws that were being proposed, was that everybody was very confused about what was happening and couldn't get answers. So there were 3 things that happened this last session that really pushed me to run. And the first one was I went to Montpelier during the proposed gun laws, and we sat in on a session in Judiciary. And I listened to that committee talk and was amazed at the amount of misinformation that they had, and listening to them talk about things that they had no understanding of, and even it openly admitted they didn't understand, but hadn't done the research on. And these are the people who are making our laws, and they are creating bills that are going to go to the floor that we hope are being read, but often are misunderstood or not read in their entirety, and they're being voted on. Then later on, I ended up holding a forum here on the gun bills, because I had had so many people talk about how much they didn't understand what was being proposed. And so I was able to get a lot of the representatives for our area here to discuss them, so people could ask their questions and understand them better. And I feel that is something that is severely lacking in this area, is the ability to approach your representatives like one-on-one. You may know your community members who happen to be running, but if you have a senator who lives in a different town, it may be much more difficult for you to approach them. And that was something that a lot of people came to me afterwards and said was how nice it was to be able to get together and ask those questions in a public forum. And it's something that's kind of lacking here. And the third thing that happened that really kind of put me over the edge was during the extra sessions that we had while we were supposed to be getting a budget finalized, we ended up with bills such as $10,000 to invite people to the state of Vermont to live. We have people here in this state that can't find good jobs, that are struggling every day, and yet we can find money to invite other people to move here to work remotely for other business outside of the state. We don't even have the infrastructure to support things like that, but yet these are the bills that were being passed in an extra session, which was supposed to focus on the budget, and instead we ended up with a bunch of new laws that had no public input. So those are major systems in our government that are broken, and it's the reason why I decided to run.
And Sam. Hello, everyone. My name is Sam Young. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you to the Chronicle and to the Orleans County Record for hosting. I am from Glover. I was raised in Barton and in Glover, and went to school here at Barton Academy and to Lake Region. I'm a web developer. I have a web development company called ThinkerSync, and I do websites for people all around the world. I was elected in 2010. I spent 4 years on the Commerce and Economic Development Committee in the House. With a kind of particular interest in trying to improve rural telecom. And also spent 4 years on the board of the Vermont Telecommunications Authority. Currently, I serve as the vice chair of the House Ways and Means Committee, which has the responsibility for taxation and tax policy in the state. This year, we did a couple of things that I think were of real value. With the federal tax changes, Vermont was going to be hit with an additional $30 million in kind of inadvertent taxes because of the changes that had happened at the federal level, and we were able to basically change the tax code in a way in which that it would be essentially revenue neutral for Vermonters. It's not on an individual level, it's not going to be the exact same for everybody, but we did try and get it to be roughly the same for people in various income classes, and also to increase the level at which Social Security is taxed. It used to be that Vermont was taxed at the same way as it is at the federal level, and we increased that amount so that if you are a person making $45,000 to $55,000, or if you're a couple making $65,000 to $75,000, that your Social Security income would not be taxed at the state level. I'm also the Vermont representative on the Streamlined Sales Tax Governing Board, which tries to create uniform taxation and sales tax throughout the states. I guess in addition to that, all of those responsibilities, my sweetheart most recently bought the Highland Lodge in Greensboro, and so I've taken on a few responsibilities there as well. So that's little intro and a little bit about me, and my time seems to be up, and so I'll pass the mic along.
And Danielle.
Hi, I'm Danielle Cody Sukeo, and thank you all for coming tonight, and thank you to the Orleans County Record and the Chronicle and Todd Pronto. I grew up in Beebe Plain, Vermont, up on the Canadian border, graduated from North Country High School. I went to college in Burlington. I went to UVM for 2 years, and then Champlain for 2 years, and then a year later moved with some friends to Seattle, and I stayed there for 25 years. And I think I had always thought I would come back at some point, and I got married and had kids and relocated everyone back to my home 2 years ago. And the two biggest reasons that I wanted to come back was I wanted to finish raising my kids in Vermont, and I also wanted to be a bigger part of my community. And certainly that's happened. I'm part of a couple different community groups, and part of the Albany Community Trust, which is reopening our store in Albany, in Northeast Kingdom Organizing, I just want to be a part of the groups around here that work to change things for the better in the Northeast Kingdom.
All right. Actually, I'll have you hang on to the microphone, Danielle. And what we'll do, since it's such a far reach, we'll just kind of, with the questions, we'll work the mic down here, and then we'll work it back that way. Sometimes I try to stagger them, but that's going to be way too confusing for me this evening. So, we're getting into the questions now.
You wouldn't make a good rear path.
I would not. I did forget to mention, though, for the sake of our viewers and the media, the Orleans Caledonia districts include Barton and Orleans, Glover, Albany, Craftsbury, Greensboro, Sheffield, and Wheelock. I didn't miss one, right?
You say Glover?
I did. Yeah. So if your town wasn't on that list, you're at the wrong forum. All right, we'll start with the questions, and we'll get as much of these in, and then we will open it up to the audience, and then if we have time after that, we'll go back to the rest of the questions. So, Danielle, we'll start with you, and we'll work our way down towards me, and then back again. 2 minutes for each answer, and the first question is, what is your position on Act 46, the school merger law, and on the Agency of Education's proposal for forced mergers? What could or should be done, or what could or should the legislature do about this?
That's a really good question, and unfortunately, I was just thinking this yesterday, Act 46 is probably the thing I'll be asked about that I know least about, and I'm afraid I really don't know much about it, which I should, because I do have 3 kids in the school system. But that is something I'm just going to have to look into and research and educate myself, regardless of what happens here, just so I can know more about it.
So I think the Act 46 question is different depending on which town you live in this district. Sheffield and Wheelock voted to merge into a larger district, and so that has already happened. For the Orleans Central Supervisory Union, we had a vote, and it failed in, I believe, 6 of 7 towns. And it's coming up for a further vote in November. And I didn't vote originally for the law, but at this point, when we're looking at this upcoming vote, I actually think that the people of this district should support the merger. And the reason is that we're going to have $500,000 cut out of our school district if we don't merge, and we'll either have to make up that money or cut the services to kids in this community in order to handle the loss of funds. And on the other side of it, there's actually a reduction in taxes that would happen if we voted to merge. The reason I'm saying this is because I believe that the state is going to force us to be merged anyway. And so we can, take the positive action and retain a bunch of money to serve our kids, as well as get a top property tax break, or lose all the money and pay higher taxes to maintain the same level of services, or and then for the lower part of our district, Orleans Southwest Supervisory Union, they don't actually even have the opportunity to merge because their configurations of all their schools are much different. But I think that the pragmatic course of action for Orleans Central is to vote to merge and retain the money.
So I originally thought that Act 46 was going to really hurt our communities. I spent a lot of time early on in these discussions being opposed to Act 46. I've changed my position on that a bit. One, because the state is forcing these mergers. They started it when they brought the money for special services back to the supervisory union. That was their first step, and when nobody said anything about it, then they began to take the next steps to bringing more centralized administrative power. One of the reasons why I think that merging through Act 46 could help our districts is that most of our schools are losing kids at a steady rate every single school year. We have a few schools that are growing or that do fluctuate, but for the most part, we are losing students. And those costs of running that school and paying our teachers don't go down, even though we have less students. So through Act 46, we can still get some of this money from the state, where if we don't merge, we are going to lose it. But even more than that, with our small populations and our small class sizes, our kids are actually required to stay with the same 10 or 12 kids for 8 years, regardless of if that child gets along with those 8 or 10 kids. There's plenty of talk in the area about school bullying, and it's been shown that if you have a student who doesn't do well with the group that they're with in kindergarten, that student still will not do well with that group by the time they're in 8th grade. There's just no options for them to move classrooms. And I'm from the southern part of the state. I grew up in Windsor, and in that school, we had 3 classes per grade. And what that gave us was the opportunity to move into different classrooms and meet new students, and allowed the school to reconfigure classes based on where kids were going to get along. And in that way, I think that we could really benefit in this area from having combined schools.
I voted against Act 46 because I felt actually what Tabitha referred to in her opening statements is so much misinformation is given to us as legislators. And Act 46 involved a lot of, I felt, bad research and misinformation that bigger is better and that it will save money. And personally, I believe our small schools know what it's about to educate kids and how to control budget and what the needs really are on the local level. And I believe that Act 46 is a top-down approach, which is completely wrong for the state of Vermont. And so I would love to see Act 46 repealed and not just go with the flow on it, because many of our communities here are going to be seeing a lot of pushback from the Board of Education. Even now, we've seen Holland School closing. And this is not something to take lightly. And I want to encourage my towns and constituents to stand up for yourself and for the future of your town and your school. Our schools are the backbone of each community, and where we have families come together and communities, we have ways to provide jobs for teachers. And it's not a good approach, Act 46. There's so many other ways to be creative in saving money, and our small communities need our smaller schools. So I believe coming soon, we're going to see litigation that's going to actually sue the state of Vermont for Act 46. And we'll see how that works out. I don't know. But I do know there's a lot of pushback and a lot of people that are very upset and not happy with the legislature and with our State Board of Education. In other places around the country are being way more creative. Other states are saying, let's get more charter schools, independent schools. Let's encourage private schools and homeschooling. Not every child learns the same. So we need to be creative, and we need to move forward by keeping our small schools, and I think standing up against what I believe is a bad law.
Act 46 was a terrible idea. It gives too much power to Montpelier when they should keep their nose out of the local school district's business. I would support stopping Act 46 dead in its tracks. It was a terrible idea. And consolidation, in theory, is a wonderful idea. The school should be doing that anyway, and likely could do it on their own without being forced or mandated to. It was in response to everybody's frustration with high property taxes, and I get that, but it was the wrong approach to take. The public administration of our school system is going to bankrupt the taxpayers of the state. It's just a complete mess, and until we get this straightened out, nothing else really matters.
I will have you hang on to the microphone, actually, Frank, and you'll start the next round. So the next question will be, historically, the Northeast Kingdom's biggest concern has been about the economy, which has largely meant the absence of jobs. In this economy, the problem does not appear to be a lack of jobs. It appears to be a lack of willing and able employees, as well as a low wage scale. What are your thoughts on that, as well as how to remedy the problem?
I'm not exactly sure. You're talking about the economy, right? Workers not being able to find jobs.
Yeah, and wages and yeah.
Well, it's difficult to do business in the Northeast Kingdom, in Vermont in general. I mean, there's too much regulation. There needs to be some common sense and reason brought to regulating businesses so that they can grow in the state of Vermont. And then, once businesses decide to move here, they need to find workers, and our education system is not educating them in a way that makes them employable. We need to structure an education system to the business's needs, and that will bring jobs to Vermont.
Well, living in our small communities, as you drive around, and here in Barton, which is one of our bigger towns, we don't see a lot of opportunity for jobs, I think, on our small communities. So many people drive to work. And I would like to see in our schools where we bring jobs into the school buildings, where kids can be, in other words, businesses and such, where kids either experience those jobs, talk to people with those businesses, or have field trips. I don't know if they do field trips anymore like they used to, but to see more kids exposed to job opportunities as they're in school, and to educate them on what's available. As we see in our area, many of our jobs are just in the home. Like Sam was talking about his web job. We have a lot of entrepreneurs, which is great. I'd like to see that grow, where we see more opportunities of young people being able to stay in the state with the job that they can do at home. I think that's really the future in many, many ways. People will be trying to work in their homes, raise their families, and that really revolves around internet access and having the capability to do that. So as we see the economy changing, I think it's going to be changing, and especially for our area, we're going to see more people working locally, entrepreneur kind of jobs, and they need to be equipped to do that.
I'll start out with addressing the low wage scale. I think that Vermont as a whole actually has a low wage scale. We have one of the highest base pays in the entire nation, but most people don't make above that minimum wage. We stay at minimum wage for years instead of getting raises. I know people who are in industries where they've worked for 10 years almost without a single wage increase, even though the cost of living has gone up. So that's a major problem in this state. And part of the reason for that is so many of our jobs are service-based. They are convenience stores and regular, retail stores, gas stations. They're service-based jobs because our state caters to a tourism industry. Instead of helping promote from the inside, instead of giving money to business growth, our tax structure makes it impossible for businesses to grow here. If you are an independent contractor or you start your own business, the second you hire one single employee, you have to almost triple the amount of money that you're making in your business in order to keep that one employee. And that just does not help job growth in this area. It just it prohibits it. It makes it so that businesses are closing. It keeps businesses from coming to this state, and it keeps new branches from opening in this state. I would like to see our government focus more on promoting job growth within than trying to get businesses from other areas to move here. All you're doing is moving locations and maybe offering tax incentives for these businesses to come here, but you're taking those jobs from another part of our country. Why not promote from within? We have a lot of entrepreneurs in this state. We have a lot of people with business ideas, but as soon as they start a business, they're immediately hit with a wall for growth, and I think that's what needs to change here.
Well, I mean, I think I'd start out that, you know, unless the government is actually expanding and creating, like, actually making the jobs, and they're a government job. The government doesn't create jobs. Businesses create jobs. You can, you know, create the environment in which people want to invest. You know, and I kind of watched it firsthand this summer, hiring a lot of people at the Highland Lodge. And one of the things that, you know, strikes me is that, yeah, a lot of people, particularly high school kids, they come in, they don't have a lot of skills. You need to train them, and it's a little bit of a public service, but you need to train people in order to do that job so that they can kind of get better and maybe get a better job. It's one of the interesting things about, like, you know, we had this debate around minimum wage this year and increasing it to $15 an hour, and sure, that sounds great, but I mean, does a high school age person really warrant making $15 an hour when they don't actually yet have any job skills, let alone even just the soft skills of, like, introducing themselves or being like, "Hi, welcome." You know, there's like. You gotta take certain steps up, and I've been involved a lot in various kind of service industry stuff around here. I helped start Parker Pie in West Glover, and you know, you gotta look at a piece of legislation like that and say, well, is it? Are businesses going to be able to survive with you know, a much higher minimum wage? And I didn't really feel that we could, and that's why that was one of the instances that I broke with my party on that. And I guess I've run out of time again. I'm going to have to start talking faster.
To answer about the lack of employable people in the low-wage jobs, I think what a lot of people up here have said is true, in that we have to prepare our people better in school. As far as, you know, career fairs or job fairs, or showing them different trade opportunities that they can learn is really good. My son goes to the Career Center at North Country, and I think that's a great program, and he's become really interested in mechatronics, which is something he wouldn't have known about. And I don't think he's going to be a four-year university type kid, so I think that's a great program that they're doing up there. And, you know, having internet for everyone would help also between the students who are, you know, trying to do their homework at home or whatnot, and also business owners that may want to move to this area. Having a good internet infrastructure is really important. And I think the third thing that would be helpful in this is improving our transportation. I think for some people, just not having reliable transportation is a big inhibitor for them to get a decent job, or maybe that's preventing some people who are very employable from getting these jobs where employers are having a hard time finding people. But that's just another issue that I think could be worked on in this area.
All right, and we'll start again with you. See, the benefit or the curse of sitting on either end is you get to do two questions in a row. So the next question is, what are your positions on gun control measures?
So I grew up in a house with 80 guns in it because my dad was a licensed gun dealer. I think I have a very healthy respect for firearms and the people that own them. And I think, I know growing up, safety first was huge. I've taken more NRA safety courses. I remember being 8 years old and being really upset because the only size bright orange slicker they gave out was like a men's large, and it was never going to fit me. But I think also that things 40 years ago were a lot different than they are now. I also know that I don't want my kids to have to worry about being shot in school. I think it's awful how many people who are in abusive relationships are shot by their abusive partners. So I think there are definitely things that need to be adjusted. I'm not exactly sure what they are, but I do believe in everyone's right to own firearms, and I, again, have a very healthy respect for them myself, having grown up with them. My kids, 2 out of the 3 of them have taken the hunter safety course just so they can become familiar with them themselves and be safe if they ever want to be hunters. So I think that there's room to improve, and I don't have an exact answer right now as to what I would propose to do that.
So I think one of the benefits of being an incumbent is that all of my positions on the various gun control bills that we have had are out there, and I guess I will reiterate that, which was that I voted to support a bill that would make it so people that had mental disability, either found incompetent to stand trial, found not guilty by reason of insanity, or were institutionalized against their will, shouldn't be allowed to own a firearm. That's something that I believed in. We had a number this year that there was one on domestic violence, which both Vicki and I supported, and one which was called kind of a red flag bill, and there would be a court proceeding if somebody was really in imminent danger. I supported that bill as well. The big bill that got a lot of the press, I supported the ban on bump stocks. I did not support the magazine capacity ban. I supported that would require somebody from between the ages of 16 and 18 to take a hunter 16 and 21 to take a hunter safety course before they purchase a long rifle. And there's a couple more in there that I'm forgetting, but it was a bill that we had a lot of discussion on. In the end, the big bill, I felt that there was a lot of problems with it, and I could support it. But my basic principle is I look at each one of the provisions and I try and determine whether or not I think it's warranted, or I feel that it would make us safer. And I've been attacked a couple of times on particularly on the mental illness one, and I would really like to hear why one of the candidates running against me thinks that we should arm the mentally ill.
So my position on guns in general, on our Second Amendment, is that it is a constitutional right, and that we have to be very, very careful about any restrictions put on a constitutional right, because it just sets up the precedent for more government overreach into constitutional amendments. Like, that is not something that I find that we want our government playing with. So my stance on gun legislation in the state of Vermont is that it is their legislation looking for a problem. The state of Vermont does not have gun problems. If you look at the numbers even proposed during this session for the number of gun deaths in the state, as soon as you took out suicides and the few shootings from police, we end up with an average of 6 shootings a year, and most of them, police will tell you, are drug-related. When you start looking at those numbers, then you have to start looking at the cause of those deaths. If suicide is the #1 cause of gun deaths in the state, then that is what we need to address. It is not being able to get a gun that causes suicide. It is a problem that that person is experiencing. We have a problem in this state with creating laws that, again, address what seems to be the immediate aftermath of the real problem, instead of addressing the problem. And these gun laws that were passed this year are just another example of that. Nothing in those gun laws will do anything to decrease the violence that's happening in this state. If you look across the nation, even in Vermont, it's actual violence that is increasing. It is not gun deaths. We have less gun deaths now than we had in 1993. We have more mass shootings. And it's not the availability of guns that has created more mass shootings, because all of these guns that we're talking about, AK-47s and other what we consider semi-automatic, I guess they're all semi-automatic, but what we consider semi-automatic guns that people seem to be worried about were all available in the 80s, and yet they weren't the problem. School shootings still happened in the 80s. What we need to address is what's causing these shootings, what's causing people to commit these crimes. It's not about guns.
I agree with Tabitha that we have to take very seriously our constitutional rights, and the Second Amendment is there, and our founding fathers put it there for very good reasons. But on the other hand, we do have to address what's happening culturally in our country, and many of the shootings that we're seeing in schools are heartbreaking and devastating. But we have to really look at the research, and there again, not jump on a bandwagon just because people are upset. But what is really happening here? And if you look at some of the research that's been done by some of these school shootings, some of these young people came from very sad home circumstances. They've been on different kinds of medications since very young children. And we have yet to see the outcome of these kids who are growing up in situations like that. And particularly with drugs, I find very alarming, and they're pharmaceutical drugs. And the combination of them and some of these young people is showing up in some of these violent attacks. And I also believe that our gun laws in Vermont are some of the most common sense that I've seen in other places. They actually keep us safe, and we live in safe communities. But as we move forward, we need to look at the root of what's going on and not just pass a law for the sake of passing a law, and really take seriously the implications when we do pass a law like that.
It is ridiculous for Sam to say that I support arming the mentally ill. That's just not constructive and not an accurate statement. I think the gun bill that the governor signed was a terrible idea. It does nothing and will do nothing to protect our children from school shootings or anybody else from mass shootings. Until people, bureaucrats and politicians start taking this issue seriously, this is going to continue.
I'm going to do one more question, and then we can open it up to the audience. And then if we're shy, then I'll go back to asking questions that are on the paper. But let's start with this question before we open it up. The expansion of the landfill in Coventry is generating considerable controversy. Many thinking that its location was bad in the first place, being so close to Lake Memphremagog and, of course, the river. Do you believe the state is providing proper oversight of water quality and that the expansion should go forward?
Well, I have little faith in state government to do that job. But it probably should go forward if they can get this right. I actually think that a gentleman in Derby had a great idea when he suggested that each county should have their own landfill. I think another situation where Montpelier needs to get out of the private businesses' hair and just enforce the environmental laws that make sense.
I've been involved with the group called DUMP to really work on the water situation, or what potential water situation right there in Lake Memphremagog and with the surrounding rivers, and been involved with the local Rod and Gun Club, where they had been raising concerns about the fish situation in our Black River and other rivers in the area, and even Lake Memphremagog, saying so many of the fish that used to be there are declining. And that could be an array of reasons why. But to raise these questions, I think, is important. And I believe that in the Northeast Kingdom, I'm excited to see a group of people raise these questions and say, what is really going on? What's the potential of expanding that landfill to such a degree, and for 22 years, a new permit? I think we should be asking these important questions and really paying attention to the potential water quality issues that can happen, as we've already seen in Bennington, Rutland area with the PFOA problem that actually is getting into the wells when the sources of those contaminants were so far away. So the landfill is promising us that those liners are going to work, but will they really in the long term? They do deteriorate. So it is alarming. And in the Northeast Kingdom, we have wind towers that were put up many times against either our wishes or without even being asked. And so with situations like that, I think we need to have a voice. And part of my responsibility, I believe, as a legislator currently serving is I want to give my constituents that voice for our local concerns. And this is a big concern for our area, not only with water quality, but with the trucks we see coming up Route 14, right through our little village in Albany, and the impact that has. So I think it's great that we're raising these concerns and that I think we're being heard. And throughout the state, people are paying attention and listening now, instead of that permit just kind of slowly being passed without our concerns being raised.
So I think the biggest problem that we're facing with this permit expansion is the fact that Vermont doesn't really have the capacity in their dumps right now to deal with the trash that we have here, or at least we won't in the near future, which is part of what has been raised with this expansion. I don't agree with us taking hazardous waste from other states. I think that is a huge concern for us, but I do understand that currently we don't have enough dumps in the area or in the state to handle all of the trash that we actually are producing, or we won't in the very near future. Currently, they're proposing, each county having their own dump, but if you look back at Vermont's history, most towns did have their own dump. I mean, Glover and Barton are still hanging on the monitoring of the dump site that we got rid of when Coventry Dump opened. So it's something that we need to look at very, very carefully. There's no place in Vermont where water isn't going to be a problem. We have a lot of lakes, we have a lot of rivers. Just with the new water quality bills for farmers, we found that most farms in the area had to get special dispensations because they can't put their manure pile anywhere on their property that fell in those regulations. They had too much water on the property. These are things that we need to look at as a state and find a solution as a whole. We can't look at an individual dump. We can't look at an individual community and say that, where are we going to put that waste if they don't get that permit? And right now there's no solution for that. So we need to start looking at our infrastructure in this state, whether that's transportation or if that's dumps or if that's the internet. We're not looking at the problems that are going to come in 5 and 10 years in this infrastructure. Instead, we're just dealing with the problems as they come up one by one. And this is a problem that every dump in the state is going to have. Every community that has a dump is going to have this problem. We need to find some solutions statewide.
Thank you. Coventry is the only dump in the state, and me and Vicki started meeting with the group pretty early on, and they were going to call themselves CCALE, Concerned Citizens Against Landfill Expansion. I said, why do you call yourselves a dump? Don't undermine men for Magog's purity. And every chance you get, call it a dump. Call it what it is. Call it a dump. And so I noticed in their press release they started calling it a mega dump, and I was like, wow, you guys catch on quick. So it doesn't really make sense to have one in every county, but something more regionalized would be better. We don't need trucks from southern Vermont driving up to the Northeast Kingdom. The location of it itself is terrible, and but the matter of fact, as it is right now, they're following the law, and they got their permit application in. It looks like that we've stalled them a bit, and in order to at least have some review and kind of look at this in the bigger picture, what is it that we really want to be doing with our trash, and putting it on the shores of Lake Memphremagog doesn't make that much sense. One of the other things that we had in the meeting that came out, which seems to be pretty important, is that rather than taking all of the garbage juice or the leachate and putting it into the Newport water treatment facility, we should be actually trying to treat or carbon filter to remove the PFOAs that the regular water treatment facility that's meant for human waste actually deals with those toxic chemicals that are coming out of the dump. And I guess on the other side of it, like looking forward, you know, the group has talked to the chair of the Senate Natural Resources Committee, who's going to be starting kind of a review on it. So like, it's a really good thing this group got started to, you know, begin the process of like, you know, it is a little late, but like, let's get it started so that we can actually plan for the future for solid waste in the state of Vermont.
So I don't know much about this issue either, unfortunately. I do think it's great, though, that there's a group like DUMP and just other, that there are concerned citizens who are standing up and asking questions. I think that's how a lot of stuff in the Northeast Kingdom is going to get done in the future, is by smaller groups doing just that, and hopefully having some effect on government and whether or not they are looking into, you know, the oversight of the water quality as they should be, since that's really important for the future of our state. And our children.
All right. Do we have questions from the gallery? Yes. We'll just have you stand up and state
Sure. My name is John Simons. I'm from Sheffield.
Perfect.
There are a number of communities, and they seem to be growing in number because of renewable energy projects in this state that now have bank accounts. I come from Sheffield. We have $1 million in the bank. Coventry has $10 million in the bank. But Wheelock has no money in the bank. And there are more communities with no money in the bank than there are those with money in the bank. It just seems to me that ability to draw money things like excess should be returned to the taxpayer. Well, if Coventry has $10 million in the bank, how much more money do they need before they should do something different with it? We should be able to focus that money, at least, to be spent in the areas where they are. Sheffield gives money, I believe it's to NCIS or NCIC, whatever it is over there in St. Johnsbury. I believe that's where it goes, but it may not be. And they invest in community projects all over the New England area. Okay? It's not just in Vermont. It's in New Hampshire. It may be in Maine. Their money is focused all over the place on good projects. I'm not saying that they're not. But if we could focus the amount of money, look what Vernon has in money. They have a huge bank account. If we could get it focused to be spent in the area where it is, we could generate an awful lot of income through jobs. We could even generate a bank within the state with that money and cut out the commissions we pay. In Sheffield, we pay a commission that sometimes is more than the amount of interest that we get. Doesn't make much sense to me, but that's what the system calls for, because it's a municipality. It can't be invested any other way. But we should be thinking about things. This state has been broke forever. But we keep doing things. If it was good enough in '63, it's good enough in 2023. And it just doesn't make much sense. So the question is, what do people think about that? Is that fair? Let's just start with, is it fair?
Thank you.
Thank you for that question. Did you say that the money these towns have in the bank is excess money from taxes that have been paid?
No, it's not from taxes. No.
Oh, sorry.
The windmills give us $500,000 a year.
For 20 years.
We put half of it to cut our town taxes by about $400 for every household. Then we turn around and put the other half of it in the bank, where it's invested by NCIC or whoever it is. I'm not real familiar with the initials. And that'll go on for 20 years. Coventry's got, again, $10 million. And what's their budget, $1 million a year? That doesn't seem fair to me.
I'm sorry, I don't know how to answer that question.
Yeah, sure. We haven't been in the legislature. That's perfectly understandable.
Do you want to give it a stab, Sam?
Sure.
We'll continue coming down this way as well.
Well, there was an agreement between the towns and the developer, and is it fair? Probably not. Should, some of the towns that have the impacts of, the wind farms, say Albany, Lowell gets all the money, but Albany has all the impacts? No, that's not fair. But, the fact of the matter is it's an agreement between the town and the power companies that money goes to them. I mean, we could make that illegal, but I think this really is a town issue, and so some of these towns have decided to reduce their property taxes, and you can reduce your municipal property taxes to zero, but you can't do your education taxes. You need to pay for the full cost of your education. So Coventry, has decided that, there's a scholarship fund in Coventry, and some of their money goes towards that. I think it is up to the town to do, and the people in those towns. That's the great thing about democracy is, get a bunch of people in your town together and decide what you want to do with the money and what you think would be the best use in the town, and make that happen. But I think that it's not something where the state should come in and, determine what is going to be done with the money in the town's bank accounts. I really think this is up to the town and the people in that town.
The only interjection I'll make here is the state started it. The state was the agent who brokered the deal. The state started it.
Okay, I wasn't aware of that.
So I think that a lot of this, what he's talking about, did come out when the wind towers were coming in and how a lot of towns met. I sat through meetings right here in this building where people were furious that the towns where the wind towers were located were going to get money, while the other towns had to look at the view, while they had to deal with the wind noise and got nothing for it. So in that way, I think that there could be, the legislature could control some of that with how some of these deals are brokered. But the fact is that the ones that have already occurred, that money is between a private business and a town, and the state shouldn't have the right to go in and tell a town what they can do with their money. Because what happens when I live in a town where we have an amazing select board and we have an amazing town clerk, and they manage to do incredible amounts with very, very little. And there's a lot of years they've actually dropped our taxes because of just being very careful, and they put money towards projects. They saved for projects for years. So if the government could come in and tell them that their savings accounts could be taken or altered, that's not fair. Not when towns plan really, really carefully for the money that they have. I do think that there needs to be something done about how some of these energy deals are brokered, because it's not just one town affected, it's not just one community's people that are benefiting or getting the negative impacts from them. So if we want to talk about renewable energy at the state level, then that would be where the state could come in and figure out something better for some of these energy deals, so other towns that have to put up with the negative consequences actually benefit from them.
Thank you, John. You're absolutely passionate. I appreciate that. Thank you for coming all the way from Sheffield. I don't think anything about how wind towers happened in our communities was fair to begin with. It's outrageous that 22 wind towers hover over the town of Albany, and that basically happened because they decided in Lowell. And so I saw that these topics were very divisive, and they divided us, brought some communities together, like Craftsbury and Albany were outraged that they could put those up in Lowell, but we've just seen so much, I think, too much pain and not enough gain. And the question having to do with the finances still puzzles me, because Coventry looks like an economically depressed town. You drive through the little village, and where's this money going? I don't get it. They have a great, nice school and a new pavement and a nice flashy sign, and I'm sure good quality education, but the community still seems depressed economically. So I don't know how to handle that. I think the subsidies that come in and push these agendas are not what's right. I think that's wrong, that government subsidies has helped pay for that. So I appreciate your bringing this to our attention, and I'd like to see it in the future not be so divisive and cause these economic inequality between communities. So thank you very much.
No, it's not fair. Another broken system created by a government that has too much power. I just want to read a quote from a guy recently it's said in Derby relating to the Act 46. He said, "You did it to yourself. You gave all this power to all these people. They're telling you when to dance, what steps to do. You have lost your vote. You gave it to your government and you're paying for it. Your grandchildren are paying for it." It applies exactly to this situation. I don't have all the answers, but I have some ideas. And we need to send people to Montpelier that have some common sense and some reason to bring to the discussion. It's another example of where local communities could work out a deal, a situation that would be a lot better than what exists now.
I noticed a lady who had her hand raised. Sorry.
So I'm Lindy Sargent from Barton, and piggybacking off your comment, Don, I think what it is
Speak
that,
up, please.
I think what it is that we have a town by town structure in Vermont. New York has a region county system. If you have issues that relate to everybody, and I think that the one that we really need to look at is climate change. If you have those kind of issues, I would love to see if all of you could comment on, is there any way, in your feeling, for communities, as we've been talking a lot about local communities, I think Danielle, you said it too, it's that a lot of the good things that are going to happen in America are going to be kind of community generated. So how is it that in Vermont, in the legislature, we can support that while not going off, while making sure that we do have basic social concerns at our hearts, that we're thinking about the future for our children, school safety, school education, training for the jobs that we want all communities to be able to have, and be able to maybe begin to change that structure so that we don't have our divisive communities against communities that are neighbors. Thanks.
So you've been talking, Frank, about how would you would like to do things differently than how the government's doing it. What would you suggest on that corner? What would be a specific program that you would try to bring out, or a way to change things in the legislature?
A way to change things, like I say, until we change our educational system and structure it in a way where we're graduating young people coming out of school with some common sense and some knowledge of the way the world works today, nothing ever will change. And I wish it would happen sooner than it will, and I have some hope that it could happen, and I'm frustrated that it's not happening soon enough. I've always said, we're just not teaching kids in school things that they need to know when they get out of school to lead a productive, constructive life in society. And all I can say is until things change in our public education system, I just have little hope that we're going to be able to solve some of these problems that we're faced with today.
So, Lindy, I'm going to take a stab at your question. It's a good question. Todd read off the list of towns that I represent, and Sam we both currently represent, and it's a vast, diverse group. And each town is so unique, and I appreciate each one and what each one offers. And what I've seen, and I'm just going to try to address the feeling, sometimes we're disheartened. And I'd like to turn that around and say I see a lot of great things happening, that because of some of the problems we've had in the Northeast Kingdom, we're starting to, I think, organize a little more and voice opinions. And Tabitha had that great forum this winter to bring legislators together and say, what about this gun control law? What is this going to do, and what is it saying? And the dump group and the different groups that have formed over years because of the problems we face. And I think that's how things are going to get done, that each community is going to have its unique atmosphere, people involved, but I just see a great camaraderie even between Craftsbury and Albany, trying to bring back to life our little general store that we couldn't do it all ourselves alone, and yet Craftsbury folks have come alongside. So I see hope, and I see a lot of involvement in people like you who are here and voicing some of these things, the newspapers writing. I think, and with media, I think we are getting stronger, and I think we'll see forward some creative ways to keep us growing economically and even as a society, to have strong communities together. I don't know if that answered it.
I think that having regional gatherings is an incredibly important piece. It's actually, like I said in my opening statement, it's one of the things that I held that forum here in April because other communities were having them, other regions were having their senators, their House reps were having them, and we weren't having one here. And it was something so near and dear to the hearts of so many people in this area. So instead, I spurred that and got that going. But I think having those regional meetings where people come together and can talk to their representatives and can talk to each other about why one feels so strongly about something and maybe another town doesn't agree is going to be incredibly important in our area. Historically, we've been a diverse group of people that have been spread out because of agriculture. As agriculture has declined, we have, our population is starting to concentrate, but we still act like we're not affecting one another. And I think that's an issue that the Northeast Kingdom really needs to deal with. And the biggest problem with that is we already can't get people to come to town meeting. I've been to town meetings where less than 30 people are present and then wonder why their taxes go up. We have to start fostering civil responsibility in our children because they're not even, 15-year-olds can't even apply for jobs. We're creating a generation of children who are not working as teens, who are coming out of school without a background in any kind of job skills, and then they're shocked when they have to pay bills. The same goes for our civil responsibilities. They don't even, I have asked people my own age why they don't come to town meetings because they say they don't even know what they're voting on. They don't even know what the positions that they're voting on in town. How are they coming out of school without knowing the positions in your town, in your state, what those requirements are? I think that's a huge problem that we have, and as much as we talk about small government and democracy, how can you have that if you don't even teach your children what's important in that government?
Well, we recently had the Northeast Kingdom Collaborative had kind of this leadership panel, and we did these community outreach sessions that were really kind of inspiring, and we talked about all of the things that were going well in your community, and one of the things that was pointed to was the Albany Store project. So there's these good ground up things, and I think it starts with a community conversation. And the Vermont Council on Rural Development did one of these in Craftsbury, where they came away where the community put 3 top priorities as their focus and worked towards those. And one of them was broadband, and they are actually building off of this fiber optic network that the state had built around the state, but hadn't been utilized yet, and they're going to be the first community that is going to take advantage of that. It should spread throughout the rest of the region, and it doesn't have to be that group, but somebody kind of like focusing that community conversation about like what it is that we want to do here to make our town better, I think is a really valuable first step. And what the legislature could do is to help provide some funding for those kind of initiatives, so that towns can work towards what makes the most sense for them.
Thank you, Lindy, for that question. I think it's a really important one, and I think that kind of what you were asking about, like, in my head, all the towns are their own separate spot, but they're kind of growing together and becoming a more regional area with connections between them. And I feel like that is kind of starting already with the different groups that are already in place, and the meetings that have gone on, and the house meetings, and just talking to your neighbor. And I think that that type of activity that's already happening is going to eventually reach up into the legislature and foster more programs perhaps for children, youth, and families, and maybe foster some more support for improving transportation in our area, which is really important in any of the issues that we face, I think, to improve transportation. So I think it has already started. It's really fantastic to feel like you're a part of it at this point, to see where it goes.
All right, so I probably have time for one more question before we get into opening statements. Closing statements. Oh, we don't want to do this again? Part 2. Did you have another question? Providing nobody else had a question, I did want to make sure everybody.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right.
Okay. We've read recently that there are some clashes going on between school boards and the superintendent. Excuse me, not school boards, but the teachers' union and superintendents. In St. Johnsbury, they've recently run the superintendent out, I believe. And in the Peacham-Barnett area, they're clashing with their superintendent right now. I'm a former member of the Steelworkers Union before it went belly up with the steel industry. And I think that you're looking at a bunch of teachers who have a great deal of seniority, and they are protecting their jobs because that's what unions do. They protect jobs. If they can't grow them, they'll at least protect them. What I'm trying to get to in the end is I believe that the education system in Vermont needs, first and foremost, to have a buyout of teachers with a great deal of seniority. I don't care if you call it 20 years, I don't care if you call it 25 years, whatever. And from there you could create new teachers, you would cut your costs, you would cap your retirement. This is what normal businesses would do when they confront a union that has too much seniority. Either that or they go out of business. Tap and die. Move on. You can't do that with teachers because we have to continue to have them. But we don't have to continue to support teachers who have 30, 35 years of experience, who are making much more money than was ever intended for education to cost. I'm not saying they don't deserve it. I'm just saying that the system is not built to have lots and lots of people with huge amounts of seniority. That's just union experience speaking. And I think you're going to keep running superintendents out of the area until the union becomes a little bit different than it is right now.
I'm a little unclear on what the actual question
the
is.
actual
Sorry.
question is, would you support a teacher buyout?
Oh, gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
On the face of it, not being an expert, I don't think right now it sounds like a very good idea, only because I just can't imagine. I mean, I'm sure there are some teachers who have been in for that long that really aren't very effective anymore and probably should go somewhere else, but I just can't imagine losing the really good ones that might still be there. And I would, I guess, need more information on the plan.
I don't know the specifics of any of these incidents because that's not really in my district, and I definitely have enough schools to keep track of as I currently. So I haven't been looking at Peacham, but I know that like in some areas where they have had a consolidation and have a bigger district, that they have been able to like plan a little bit more and reduce some of the costs of the teacher. I don't know if it's a buyout, but the other side of that equation though is the teachers' pension fund, and we tried to put an additional $30 million in there. But if you have a mass retirement, then the situation with the teachers' pension fund, which is probably the biggest financial obligation that the state has underfunded, and is the reason why we tried to put an extra $30 million in there this year, would see an even more severe hit. And so, I mean, might sound good on the face, but you really need to look at all of the numbers.
My short answer is no, I do not support a buyout. I have a background in journalism. I went into that industry because it was one of the most stable industries in history. Unfortunately, I kind of missed that boat, and I graduated at the height of buyouts. So you have people who have been in an industry for a very long time who have a lot of background knowledge. When you start talking about teachers, you're also talking about teachers who taught pre-Common Core. Now, we have teachers coming in, they're graduating, that are learning completely different than the teachers who graduated 2 years before them. We have teachers at the senior level who are teaching math to some kids who learn different than their juniors, that learn different than their freshmen, that are going to learn completely different than the sixth graders that will be coming in the future. We actually have a great resource in our older teachers because they are able to adapt to their students' learning styles better than current teachers are because they're forced to teach to Common Core. I think our system is broken. I think it's highly broken. I think our education system is a very important discussion over the next few years, and I think something needs to be done. But I think buying out a union contract is not where it's going to happen. I think that's a temporary fix for a very, very big problem.
So that was interesting thoughts, John. Thank you. I like to think outside of the box sometimes, and I hadn't heard that idea. But our superintendent, John Castle, I think is doing a great job for our area, and so I'm not aware of St. Johnsbury. But I will say that our current educational system is unsustainable, and we are in a crisis, whether we really realize it or not. Our current spending for our schools is unsustainable. And we haven't yet, as a legislature, really addressed why. And it's a lot of reasons. Montpelier particularly giving a lot of all of their rules and regulations coming down from the top and increasing the need for school boards to say, well, we're supposed to have this, X, Y, and Z. How are we going to do that? We also have the highest per pupil spending in the country. And we have the highest student-teacher, the ratio of smaller amount of students per teacher in the country. And God bless our teachers. They do a great job, and we need them. But how do we address this? Instead of a buyout, I might use the word incentive, that if some teachers have seniority, and I give them a lot of credit if they're not burnt out, but maybe incentives. Maybe they would like to retire and have a second kind of job in their life and have incentives to do so. But I wouldn't necessarily call it a buyout, but I think we have to be creative to address the crisis we have. that we want good education, we want quality, we want our teachers to be happy in the classroom. And just as a quick little note, I will say that I'm a believer in school choice, and that in regions even, if kids could go to school, the school of their choice, I think we would see an improvement in the happiness of teachers and the improvement in the happiness of students, and in the end, see cost savings. So I'll just say that I think we need to reinvent our educational system. I think we need to be creative, and I think Vermont has a great opportunity to do that because we're a small state.
It's a great idea to be put under consideration as just one part of a really, really large effort to restructure our educational system. Public service shouldn't be a place to enrich oneself financially, and it's a real problem. I always say when common people and farmers and all others get a Cadillac healthcare system and a Cadillac financial pension, then yeah, I support it for teachers and government workers. But until that happens, it's just it's another broken system. And we really need to reward great teachers. And there's too many people in our educational system, too many teachers in our educational system are there for the money. We need to reward passionate, inspiring teachers. There's this great program, I can't really speak intelligently to it now, but it was profiled recently in the Hardwick Gazette, this one teacher, this accreditation program for this one teacher. You just reading the article, you could tell that she was just in love with the job that she had, which was teaching. And she just rose above so many others, and she should be rewarded generously for that. But we really need to clean the house on this one.
All right, it's now time for closing statements. So we'll go down the line. Each candidate gets 2 minutes for the closing statement. If you do have questions that we didn't get to, there's something you'd like to know, the candidates are here. You can talk to them afterwards, and I encourage you to do that as well. So this is each candidate's chance to shine and tell them why they should get your vote. It's your mic drop moment, but don't drop the mic because we don't own it. So 2 minutes.
So Vermont can and should do a better job. It's pretty obvious that if you elect me, you're sending somebody to Montpelier who's ready for change, somebody who wants to do things differently. We shouldn't be afraid to take risks. We shouldn't be afraid to make mistakes. We need to think outside of the box. We need to use some common sense, and we need to test some different ideas. So I'm a tough negotiator. I'm not politically correct. I'm willing to do things differently, and I will fight really, really hard on behalf of the constituents of this district to do things differently. We just get the same results by doing the same old thing, and it's not working. And I have a lot of hope, but we have to make progress much faster if we're going to see some great things happen in Vermont. The last couple of years, I really feel like our governor has made a great effort in trying to put a focus and awareness on things that he sees, which I agree with many, that need to change. But he's met a lot of resistance. And I said 2 years ago that I will be an ally in this effort to get our educational system right-sized. And he just needs some allies. If we keep electing some of the same liberal legislators who keep opposing and overriding these vetoes and overriding these ideas that he has for change, then we're going to continue to get set back. So I would be an ally with the governor in trying to figure out how we fix this educational system. And so you get 2 votes, and I hope that you'll choose me as at least one of them.
Thank you all again for coming and for your patience and for your questions. It's been a privilege for me to serve for 4 terms, and I don't take this job lightly. I take it seriously and look at it as a form of sacrifice for myself and my husband. I'd much rather at 7 o'clock on a January morning be home with him, but instead I'm on the road driving to Montpelier to serve you, my constituents, faithfully. And I will do so, if I'm reelected again, faithfully and passionately. And I believe I go to Montpelier every morning thinking of you, my constituents, with you in my mind. I'm there to serve you. I'm not there to serve myself or to make myself important or to necessarily promote a political agenda. I want to do what's common sense and what's in the best interest of my communities in the Northeast Kingdom, being affordability, the most important one really, in the long run. And I fought to not raise taxes or fees and stood firm on that because what we need to do is keep a little more of our money in our pocket and see our economy grow here. So that's a balance, obviously, and I want to go there and serve you again, and I will do so happily and sacrificially if I'm reelected again. Thank you.
I live in this town, in this community. I have a home here, I'm a property owner. I have a teenager that's in school in the area. I know what it's like to live here. It's gotten more and more difficult. I watched my parents struggle raising children in Vermont, and I watched my friends struggle, and we've struggled trying to raise our family here, but we stay here because these are where our roots are. These are where our family is. And unfortunately, we don't seem to be getting a lot of information, and there doesn't seem to be a lot of consideration for the rural communities when it comes to the legislature. We seem to be getting a lot of top-down measures that seem to be band-aids over really, really large problems, and we seem to be getting a lot of legislation that helps the more populated areas of our state and ignores the rural communities. And it's been a huge issue in the last 10 years that's just not being addressed. And I don't hear anything coming from even our local representatives, really, when it comes to that. And it's my biggest issue. It is the reason why I put together a forum when I saw that even our local representatives weren't bringing the information to us that we were asking for. We were asking for it in the papers, we were asking for it in letters to the editor, and in the fact that a lot of people from the Northeast Kingdom went down to Montpelier this year and made their voices known, and yet we really weren't hearing much from Montpelier in our direction. It is why I've put together 2 meetings coming up this October. One is going to be a voters clinic for the end of the month. It's on Sunday, October 21st at Parker Pie that evening, and there will be a women's in politics event coming up, because I think that our communities we have a low voter turnout. We have a low representative rate of our population that comes to these things, and I think it's very important that we start getting our people involved.
Well, I think common sense is in the eye of the beholder, and so I'll just suggest that you vote for my common sense. I have worked for the past 8 years in the legislature to try and make improvements for the NEK. And while on the board of the Vermont Telecom Authority, we funded and built a fiber optic network that will start serving customers in Craftsbury this year and expand to towns throughout the area. I have helped pass funding for broadband for the past 2 bienniums that was eventually killed by the Senate. But that is the value for this area of having a rep on the House Ways and Means Committee. Having someone in a position that helps decide what legislation is funded and what is not. Someone who can protect current use for farmers and foresters, someone who can represent our interest in debates around property tax reform. And if you look at the governor's proposals, just briefly, you'll notice that it takes away all local control. Before I served in the legislature, I used to think that I wanted a representative that was loud and brash, who would really knock some heads around. And what I know now is that those people are ineffective. What we need are legislators that can learn quickly, master a subject, and make sound arguments to the right people at the right time. All of these things take time to learn, and over time I have proven myself and cultivated the right relationships necessary to be an effective advocate for residents of this area. I still find the work rewarding and challenging, and given the chance, would like to return for another term. I hope you'll give me that chance and vote for me on November 6th.
So thank you all again for coming and your questions. And like I said in my opening, I moved back here 2 years ago. One of the reasons, or one of the things I wanted by moving back here was to become more involved in my community. And however that will look for me, I believe that we in the Northeast Kingdom are resilient. And by connecting with others across our region, we can affect change for our region and the state as well.
All right. Well, that will conclude the Orleans Caledonia Forum for this evening. I do want to thank all of the candidates for attending and participating in the forum, all the people that came out to watch as well, the town of Barton for the use of the building and the sound system that we're using this evening. Terry from NEK-TV, he's taping this, so we'll be on channel 15 if you get Comcast. If you don't get Comcast, because I am aware that some of the towns don't have the lines to run out there, it will be on YouTube as well, and you can go to our website to check that out. Robin from the Orleans County Record and Tina from the Chronicle for putting this together, and don't forget to vote November 6th. That's the day. It's the only day. If you sleep in, that's it.
You can start voting now.
Oh, that's true. Well, you can't vote after November 6th.
Okay.
That's what I meant to say. You can do the early stuff, yes. Thank you so much.